You have some questions up there if you'd like to use them as a guide for your discussion, but if you think they're useless and you'd rather not, you do it. But you have 7 minutes before we're going to move then on to the second quality, which is high real self-esteem. So away you go.
We're going to move the mic onto this
shirt
and see if I can...
All right. I trained as a coach, and I did a couple of postgraduate qualifications, but I also trained for 4 years alongside psychotherapists in training. So when I gave up my corporate career in 2004, I explained to my kids who would have been about your age. My daughter was 20, my eldest son would have been about 22, and my youngest son would have been about 17, something like that. And I explained to them that, okay, I was giving up the job, so goodbye the car, goodbye the salary, the share options, the private health, the pension scheme, and all that sort of stuff. And I would be going really hard at finishing off my postgraduate certificate, then doing a postgraduate diploma. That's a sort of master's level program. Meanwhile, I would be training alongside psychotherapists while trying to build a business, because I started with 0 clients over the first 2 years or so. And I explained that because of the psychological training, I would have to go and see a psychotherapist once a week for an hour, which I assure you for an ex-executive is a bit weird. At least it is in Britain. Maybe it's a bit more okay in the USA. It was a bit weird. And one of my daughters, this is Charlotte, she was 20 at the time, she's now 30. One of my daughter's friends, Jenny, approached Charlotte and said, look, my parents were asking about your dad. He's given up his job or something, hasn't he? Yeah, Charlotte. He's become an executive coach. Oh, because my mum and dad want to know what's he doing. Obviously, they thought, he's the poor fella. He's lost it. So my daughter replied, this is what she said. Well, she said, we're a bit confused. It's not very clear. But basically, I think it comes down to this. He's got a 2-year plan, and he's seeing a psychotherapist. Which actually is spot on, but wasn't that helpful for my reputation locally. Okay, now hopefully you found that interesting, and you've all got a score now for personal power, yeah? Okay, so we're now going to go to the second quality, which is high real self-esteem. Now, to be clear, your self-esteem flows from your self-image. What is your self-image? It is your mental picture of your strengths, your flaws, your potential, your place in the world. That is your self-image. Some people call it self-construct, self-concept, self-identity. It's all the same thing. I think self-image is my preferred term. Now, here's the big thing. Your self-esteem flows from your self-image, because the best, simplest definition I've ever come across for self-esteem is your feelings about your self-image. And it's not just short and snappy, it's very insightful, because when you really grasp that, you realize that your self-image governs your self-esteem, your feelings about yourself. Can you see that immediately? That makes sense? So your self-esteem is governed by your self-image. So if you've got high self-esteem, you'll feel you matter. You're someone. You're important. You don't get into comparisons with other people. You don't sort of say, I'm more important. But you matter. You feel that you're someone who'll be noticed. You'll also feel that you're competent, that you can cope with life, that you're good at your job, you can make a difference, and you can take responsibility for yourself and maybe others as a leader. And the third aspect of self-esteem is that you will feel that you're a nice person. You're decent. People will trust you. They'll like you. You're worthy of another person's love. Those are the 3 basic aspects of self-esteem. Now, somebody with high self-esteem feels that they do matter, that they're competent, not that they know everything, and that they are essentially decent, likable, lovable. That's high self-esteem. And when you've got high self-esteem, you're not feeling so defensive, you're not feeling anxious, you're not going to feel you're going to be exposed at some point. But this isn't just high self-esteem. As you see up there, the word real is emphasized. You see, there are some people who appear to have high self-esteem, but it's fake. It's a put-on job, as we would say in Britain. It's not real. Inside, they don't feel quite as good as they pretend. And you can spot that, again, when things get difficult, when things start going wrong. That's when they'll start avoiding decisions or getting dictatorial, or they'll start criticizing and pointing the finger and looking for scapegoats and starting to be insensitive and make mistakes. But the person with real self-esteem doesn't have those problems. The person with self-esteem feels good about themselves, so they don't have to get into comparisons with other people. They don't have to defend themselves. And although they feel good about themselves, it is grounded self-esteem. So the person with real self-esteem is able to admit what they don't know, or what they're not good at, or what they got wrong. That's when you can tell self-esteem. They're comfortable with exposing the stuff that others, without such self-esteem, are able to. They're able to expose stuff that other people cannot. That's when it's grounded. So why is it useful? Well, when you've got self-esteem, high self-esteem, and it's the real thing, you appreciate yourself. And you will find, and I know this sounds like it comes out of a Christmas cracker, that if you're going to love others, you've got to love yourself first. I assure you it is true from personal experience. And I have to say, working with a psychotherapist was amazingly helpful for that. So if you appreciate yourself, you will appreciate others more. You will feel more empathy. You'll be able to connect with them easier. You'll be able to sense what they're thinking and feeling easier. But there is another couple of payoffs. The second one is your behavior will be more flexible. You won't be caught in a narrow range of behaviors. You will be able to respond naturally in many ways while feeling genuine, while feeling authentic. And you will have this sense of resilience. Because you won't, if events are going badly and a competitor has surprised you with a new product launch or something, you don't take that so personally as an attack on your competence and your fitness to be a leader. I don't mean you won't do anything about it, but you don't take it quite so seriously as an attack on yourself. Consequently, you don't get so nervous, you don't get so defensive. So these are the hallmarks of high real self-esteem. So once again, you have these set of statements. So if you now turn to the second set of 9 statements, and you're probably getting the idea right now, if your score corresponds with a black circle that you see up there on the screen, then give yourself a tick on the right. If it corresponds with a white circle, don't leave it blank. So if you could just put in the ticks on the right-hand side and then score yourself, and then you have 7 minutes with your table leaders to discuss what's arising, using those questions there as a guide or not as you see fit. So over to you. Okay, if you can bring your discussions to an end. And first of all, an apology. The microphone has apparently been cutting in and cutting out as I've been talking, and I think we found the solution, which was that the other handheld microphone was on, and that was causing some sort of interference. So hopefully this will not cut out. But if it does, I will try to yell and project louder. Okay, so now we're on to the fourth quality, which is balance. This sounds better. Balance is this, on the one hand, powerful connection with your values, showing as a powerful drive to accomplish a task, a mission, a goal, a vision, whatever you want to call it, an intent. Balanced at the same time by sensitivity to other people's needs and their priorities, and an uncompromising respect for their free will. So that's the balance that I'm talking about. And it emerges as a drive, as an urge to make things happen that the group or the organization or even the nation wants to happen. So you are applying this will in the service of a cause that's greater than you, a cause that benefits people, doesn't harm people. So this is how it expresses itself. Now, there are 3 great payoffs to this particular quality. First of all, it avoids the risk of the opposite, which is imbalance. So one imbalance is when you're really biased towards the mission, the task, the objective. And that's been one of my mistakes in my younger years, because I didn't want to fail. Because guess what? Part of me said I'm not good enough. When I became a chief executive at 38, I realized that was quite strongly there. So you can find yourself very biased towards the mission, the objective. If you are too imbalanced in that direction, those who've led will know that sometimes you can be too harsh, you can become insensitive, you can start to treat people as objects towards your success. And here's the ironic thing. When you behave insensitively, you start behaving unskillfully, and what does that do? Well, that means that people can start to turn off, and they don't support you, and at worst, they will start sabotaging. That can definitely happen. So, in fact, your overemphasis on the task is the very thing that causes the task not to get done. That's the irony of this. Now, at the even more extreme end, if you adopt a fanatical approach and you totally buy into the end justifies the means, this is when you can get dictatorial. And that's when really unpleasant stuff happens. That's an extreme version of it. But the other end of the scale is not helpful to a leader either. You may find yourself too concerned by others' feelings and too concerned by others' reactions to you. And that is a problem as well, because unfortunately as a leader, you have to be the lightning rod, you have to be the activator of some decisions that aren't that nice. I've had to make jobs redundant, hundreds of people redundant. I've had to fire some people. Unfortunately, sometimes that does fall to the leader. You have to do that on behalf of the group or behalf of the organization. It does happen. And if you are imbalanced to that side of the equation, you will start ducking issues. And that is extremely frustrating to your team members and people in your organization when they see you're not dealing with issues, particularly problem members of the group or underperformers. So the first benefit of this particular quality is that it guards against going to one or the other extreme. The second benefit is that it's a natural antidote to leadership for evil ends. So this now injects a moral quality. The third thing is that I think it helps again highlight the difference between what I'm calling presence and charisma, because the charismatic person can find themselves largely engaging in self-serving objectives and self-serving activities because they need it to prop up their self-esteem. Whereas with presence, this is very much about service. In the book, I quote a general. I know we've got one or two people who've been in the military. He was an army general, American. I've forgotten his name. And he was talking about the power of caring about your men and your women. Because if you care and you show you care, that affection, that loyalty will come back to you. Those of you who have led, I don't know if you've experienced that. When they know you care, they will care in return. So that's why it's helped. Now, this is really hard to get right because many of us are action-orientated leaders who want to make things happen and get it done. But what I'm saying is this involves balance. So you're also paying attention to people's feelings and their priorities, and you thoroughly respect their free will. So you're supposed to get things done and respect people's priorities and concerns and their right to make choices, their free will. How do you square that? Now, this is a difficult one, and I personally wrestled with this for a long time. And so do my clients. And some of you, the more experienced members here, may have wrestled with the same thing. Here's what I found the answer is. And interestingly, the teachings of Gautama Buddha, the Buddha who lived 2,500 years ago, are very helpful to leaders here. Specifically, the teaching of non-attachment. Anybody familiar with the teaching of non-attachment? I'm getting some nods. So very briefly, this says, have a goal, have a purpose, have an objective, but don't become attached to it. So it's your strong preference, you have a passion for it, but you don't let your self-image and your emotional state, your sense of satisfaction, your happiness, be so dependent on having the result or being the result, achieving that objective, that you get angry or you get frustrated or you get nervous or you get defensive. So one of the things I often discuss with leaders who are struggling with tension is the boundary between having a responsibility to the people you lead and having a responsibility for them. Now, this may surprise you, but you as a leader are responsible to people, in my view, for leading skillfully, giving your best. But ultimately, you are not responsible for their reactions to you. That is their responsibility. Now, this is a really difficult one in organizational life because organizations tend to make the top man or top woman responsible if things go wrong. But actually, in real life, they are not responsible for other people's reactions, provided they've played their role to their best ability. The leader who has got this does their best, but knows that they have a responsibility to others, but not for them. And that is a key to not becoming attached to the goal and behaving insensitively and unskillfully, I have found. So it is hard to get right. Now, to be clear, this is not about indifference. To be clear, this is about having a passion for the goal, a very strong preference, but not getting attached to it. And this avoids the possibility that you might start forcing others to do things for their own good. You might have some progress towards it, particularly if you're trying to lead change in an organization, which in my experience is the ultimate leadership challenge. And having talked to a recently retired general in the British Army, he was saying we train our officers extremely well to lead small groups, and I'm always confused about the units. I don't know what the smallest unit is, a platoon or something. We're very good there. But when our commanders become colonels and above, we're not always dealing with combat conditions. We're actually talking about policies and training methods and attitudes and dogma, and we run into difficulty there. So this is when this is helpful, balance. So once again, you now know the routine. You have your answers. Here are the statements. So score yourself according to whether it corresponds, your answer, to a white circle or a black circle. And then when you've completed your scoring, you have 7 minutes to chat with your table leaders. And I will call time as you get towards the end of your 7 minutes. If we can bring the discussions to an end, please. So the fifth quality of presence, in my experience, in my view, is intuition. Now, the problem with intuition is it gets confused with instinct, thinking shortcuts, which I suppose academics would call heuristics. It gets confused with prejudice, and it gets confused with the ability to read other people's body language. So let's just run through those, because intuition, as I'm defining it, is none of those. So your instinct is it's not something you learn. It's a pre-programmed, body-based program all around handling danger and survival. So I feel hungry, eat. So with intuition, it shares this very sort of quick, instant feel, but how do you distinguish between it? Because instinct doesn't have any of the forward-looking, any of the creative breakthrough element to it. It is simply a body program. That's instinct. Thinking shortcuts, heuristics. Thinking shortcuts are very useful ways of solving problems without very slow step-by-step reasoning. But it's based on previous experience and previous learning. So it will often show up as a rule of thumb, and as you gain more experience, as an educated guess. But here's the problem with thinking shortcuts. They're exposed to what psychologists call cognitive bias. Now, cognitive bias is where you only see what you expect to see or you want to see, which is a real problem for leaders. And you deliberately, without realizing it though, so that's a bad word, you screen out what you don't want to see or you don't expect to see. And you can think of In Britain, I'm going to risk being controversial here. Our feeling about our ex-Prime Minister Tony Blair is he saw only what he was wanting to see. For example, I realise I'm maybe treading on sort of sensitive ground here, but that's how we see it in Britain. So cognitive bias, seeing what you expect to see, what you want to see, and refusing to see what you don't want to see or don't expect to see, can mean you can misjudge and you make mistakes. That's the problem with thinking shortcuts. And prejudice, another thing that can be confused with intuition, well, prejudice is prejudging. It is a preformed opinion based on your experiences from the past. But you're not seeing the situation afresh. You may be judging a person or pigeonholing a person based on what you think were similar people from the past. And once again, by prejudging a situation, you can make some appalling mistakes. The difficulty is that thinking shortcuts and prejudice do give you that instant, oh, I know the answer, or I know what the problem is here. So that is a bit like intuition. But like instinct, it lacks that forward, creative, insightful breakthrough element. So that's how you can tell the difference. The other thing that intuition can get confused with is the ability to read somebody's body language. This is the ability to read your expressions, your facial expressions, your micro-expressions, the tiny expressions that last a half a second or less, to interpret accurately people's body language, their gestures, and so forth. Now, that's an extremely useful skill, but that's what it is. It's a social skill. It's not intuition. So what do I mean by intuition? I mean the ability to grasp an idea, a truth, an insight, without conscious step-by-step reasoning and analysis, and without having to rely on past experience. You might be relying on past data, but not necessarily past experience. So it is as though we grasp something that was always there, but it was just hidden out of sight, behind a curtain, behind a veil. So again, I'm talking abstractly, so let me give you a concrete example. Albert Einstein, 1905. I think that was his theory of special relativity. And that's when his paper explained that time isn't absolute. The passage of time is not absolute, although it feels like it to me and you, I imagine, that it is in fact relative to the speed that we're traveling at. So if you have a twin, and the twin goes off in a rocket ship, he realized, and travels for 50 years as measured by the twin on Earth, when the twin returns, the twin will not have aged as much as the twin that was left behind. Now, don't ask me to explain that, because I don't fully get it intellectually. Every time I read it in Time magazine, I get it. And then it's like it leaks out like water through a bucket. But the plain fact, it is true. They have tested it by flying aeroplanes around the world at incredibly fast speeds and with atomic clocks on the ground. And the faster the planes are flown, the more of a difference there is. So the point is this. Here's the question for you. Did he invent relativity, or did he detect relativity? Go on, somebody shout out their view. Oh, you're all saying he detected it. So in other words, this was a truth that was always there. What he did through soaking his mind in the data and consciously going out, and he was playing mental games with it. He played imaginary experiments like what would happen if a person was running alongside a beam of light, traveling, of course, at the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second. He played those games. But he realized something that was invisible to everybody else. Do you follow me? He didn't invent it, he detected it. Well, that's how I see intuition. It's like you whip away the veil and you see what was always there but was previously hidden by our limiting mindsets, our prejudices. This is what intuition is. And it shows in leaders as, particularly founders of new businesses, it will show as tremendous innovativeness around the service of the business or the product development. So it'll show up in that sort of creativity, a sort of creativity that can shock an industry. It will show as foresight, the ability to envisage a future that others hadn't, but which years later become obvious. Of course, why didn't they see it? They didn't see it because we create these curtains, we create these veils. And sometimes intuition shows up, in my experience, as the ability to cut through the fog, the confusing sort of stuff that's going on, and see that that is the essence of the situation. That is the essence of the problem. And sort of grab it and clarify it for everybody. So that's how I see intuition. If you're wondering, how do you develop your intuition, I found there's 3 keys. 1, learn to concentrate. Because your intuition seems to develop when you really stew on a problem for a while. And it's a mysterious thing. You soak in the data, you ask yourself questions, you maybe make some notes, and then funnily enough, in my experience, the intuitive insight comes when you're not thinking about it, like you're just going to bed, or you're just waking up, or you're chatting with your mum or something, and that's when you get it's like a half idea that lasts a very short while. Write it down. And you know it's a good idea, in my experience, when you look at it afterwards and say, that's obvious. That's a very good sign when it's obvious afterwards. So learn to concentrate. The second key to developing your intuition, and this is a challenge for highly intellectual people who rely on their intellect, is learning to discern the difference between your intuition and thinking shortcuts and prejudice and instinct and body language reading skill. I certainly lacked intuitive ability for a while because I distrusted it. Because I now realize I couldn't tell the difference between prejudice and intuition. Learning to meditate, I must say, helped me enormously. So the second key is learning to discern what is genuine intuition from what is in fact a prejudice. That's probably the biggest problem. Or what is in fact a thinking shortcut that is causing you problems because you are prejudging. The cognitive bias problem that I mentioned. And then the third key flows from the second, because you learn to trust your intuition. And I've met some very intellectual people who won't trust their intuition because they haven't learned to detect the difference between that and prejudice, for example. So once again, you know how we're doing this. That's how you score yourself. Black circle, give yourself a tick. White circle, don't. And as soon as you've ticked that and added up your scores, have a chat about it in your group, please. So in the now. Now, this quality is hard because most of us are trapped in feelings and preoccupations about the past or the future, particularly leaders in my experience. So here's a strong statement coming up. Neither the future nor the past is real. I will say that again because it is a bit shocking. Neither the future nor the past is real. Now, how can I possibly say that? Let's take the future. The future is an imagined now. It's an imagined construct. But the future never comes. Because when you get to the future, when is it? It's now. So the future isn't real, it's in your head. And when you think about the future, when are you doing it? Now. Okay, now if you allow your anticipation of the future and your insistence that the future be fit a certain form, that's when your ability to think clearly gets clouded. That's when your emotions are brought in. You get tense, you get defensive, and that's living in the future. A huge problem for most executives, me included in the past, me included. Because you are very much about goals and objectives and plans and that sort of stuff. But your image and your self-esteem can get wrapped up in it. You will find some people who are very much living in the past. Experiences they've had and the meaning and the significance they put on those past experiences have meant that they respond to events right now not as they are, or they respond to people not as they are, but as they remember. So they're responding to them through a filter, a learned pattern. So that is living in the past. So the problem here is either living in the past or living in the future. So being in the now means focused attention to what is happening here, now. in the room, in this conversation, in this conflict perhaps, when you can let go of the unhelpful grip that the past has over you, and you can get rid of the unhelpful grip that the future has over you, you will find yourself more resilient, you'll find yourself more flexible, you'll find yourself able to respond more intelligently, sensitively, and skillfully to events. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying the past did not happen. I said it's not real. And by real, I mean it's not happening now. I am not saying ignore the past. I am not saying deny what happened. I am saying don't let the past and the patterns that you've developed because of the meaning and significance you put on it control you in the now. And sometimes that means you should look at the past and you understand and how that's controlling you now. And that's why sometimes work with a counselor or a psychotherapist is useful to us. I am not saying don't plan for the future. Don't have goals for the future. If you're a leader, you've got to have goals. Because if you think about it, leadership is leading folk somewhere to some sort of destination. What I am saying is don't get emotionally and mentally attached to a particular future. So you now start to see, hopefully, how the qualities start to overlap. Now, you may think this is rather abstract and rather philosophical. Who amongst you plays sport? Hands up. Anybody here hoping to be a professional in sport in later life? So nobody at that level. Well, what I found is elite sportsmen and women, they get this quality. Because you've got to be in the now. The first person I heard talk a lot about it was Martina Navratilova. Remember her? Fabulous tennis player. I don't know, over 20 Grand Slam titles. And tennis players were one of the first people to realize the importance of the inner game. And this thing about being in the now means that you're not projecting forward to, God, if I lose this point, I'm out of Wimbledon. Or if I win this point, I am the Wimbledon champion. That's going into the future, and that will immediately introduce interference, double faults. You'll hit the ball out, or you hit it too softly, you'll hit it too short. And if you're at the same time, no, not at the same time, if instead you're thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, the bad line call, you get less of them these days with Hawkeye, but you're in the past. Or you're thinking, last time I got to this situation with Djokovic, he came back at me. That induces performance interference. So professional sportsmen and women and sports psychologists, they absolutely get this because this is very much about performing at your peak under pressure. But we in organizational life have not got this. This is really practical. This matters to your performance as leaders. So once again, there are some questions to help you probe where you are on this particular statement. Because we're a little bit behind, because we had to wait for people to do questionnaires, I'm going to cut this to 6 minutes. So score yourself as you've done before. Ticks where there's black circles, left blank, and then you have 6 minutes to have a chat about what's emerging on this quality of in the now. Okay, so let's deal with the last quality, and then after you've scored yourself and had the discussion on the last quality, which is inner peace, flow, and joy, then you'll be having a break, you'll be pleased to know. So inner peace, flow, and joy. This is freedom from your worst doubts and your worst fears. In a sense, you could say it's a reward of the other 6 qualities. But there are complex relationships between the 7 qualities, which I wasn't planning to get into today. I have a slide that I decided to cut out because it's getting too detailed. So it starts with freedom from doubt and fear, and it starts to then flow into a sense of spontaneous flow, a spontaneous enjoyment. And that's very much from the freeing yourself up from the anxieties and the fears and the doubts, and also flowing from the feeling, the experience that you are now living a fulfilling life. Now, one of the earlier qualities, the drive to be more, to grow, was the urge to live a fulfilling life. This is the experience that you are living a fulfilling life, I have to say. And it's certainly something I experienced when I switched from the corporate world. For many years, I did enjoy and feel it was fulfilling being a CEO, and then I realized a part of me was dying and wanted to become more. And it meant, and it was literally, it felt like a death. Something that was so important to me at 23 to become a managing director, a chief executive, in my late 40s wasn't. And I realized there was something else, and it was a little bit awkward for me at the time. So when you are experiencing this quality, life starts to feel easy. You no longer experience it as a struggle. For much of my life, if you'd asked me to define life, I would have used the word struggle. But I wouldn't today. But I am 60. So if you can start to experience this in your 20s, you're going to be decades ahead of me, that's for sure. So life starts to feel easy. It starts to, and you've got a background belief, an intelligent optimism that life will work out well, that it's not a horrible world, it's not a horrible life. It's not, as my daughter sometimes says, but Dad, it's a dog-eat-dog world. I don't experience it as that. I really don't. Now, the word flow. The man who's done the most detailed, important work on flow has got an almost unpronounceable name. So I had to write down his name. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He has written I've rehearsed that, I admit that. That is not just brought out. Now, he has written a book on flow, and he's the expert on flow. And when he talks about flow, he talks about total immersion in a task. You're so immersed in it, you're lost in it, you lose sense of time, you're feeling tremendous ease, tremendous enjoyment, tremendous satisfaction. And he lists 4 conditions true for a flow experience. 1, the task has a very clear goal. 2, it feels important to you and worthwhile. 3, you are getting feedback during the performance of the task. Like if you're playing a tennis match or you're playing golf, you're getting immediate feedback on your scores and how your competitor's doing. And the 4th condition is that you go into it feeling you have enough skill, enough know-how to do it well. Now, I mention this because I'm using the word flow in a slightly different way. I'm not talking about flow in a particular task that you feel you know how to do well. I'm talking about flow in, if you like, the bigger task of life, living your life. So this isn't task-specific. So as a leader, there will be many tasks you know you're not very good at. There's stuff you won't know. If you're running a pharmaceutical company, there may be aspects of the biology or the pharmacology you simply don't understand. So you can still flow because you're comfortable about delegating issues and responsibilities to others who do know more than you, who are more skilled in that particular area. And as a chief executive, and I imagine it's the same as a general, there are stuff that you're not going to know. So you've got to feel comfortable with dealing with this. So the thread running through all of those 7 qualities is what's in the ball. It's wholeness, to come back to this. Wholeness being the absence of inner division. Or if you like, this positive inner alignment between your sense of purpose, your self-image, your feelings about yourself, and your feelings about life. You feel you're being true to yourself. The real you is coming out, and it's expressing itself powerfully, creatively, skillfully, maybe lovingly. And when wholeness is at its maximum, in my experience, not only do you inspire others to the best performance, you can inspire others to release their potential as well. That's at the high end of wholeness, in my experience. So we go to the final bit. Score yourself, as you've done before, on the other 6 qualities. And I'll say 5 minutes here, because we're a little bit over time. 5 minutes to discuss amongst yourself. And when the 5 minutes is up, I will call a 10-minute break, which I imagine you all need. So a couple more comments about the qualities, and then we'll move into the second part, which is about how you develop your own presence. To be clear, it's not a case of you either have presence or you don't have presence. What I'm saying is there are degrees of presence. You may exhibit some of the qualities, you may experience some of the qualities, but not others. Even if you're experiencing all of the qualities, you may not be experiencing at their maximum extent. And that quality measures sort of 0 to 9. So what I'm saying is it's not binary. You may have some, but not all of the qualities, and some of the potential of that quality, but not all of the potential for that quality. So let me give an example of famous people who most of us would say, that person had presence. Now, here's my British bias. I show our wartime Second World War Prime Minister here, Winston Churchill. He would be regarded as one of the great men of the 20th century, and certainly would be seen as a man with presence, and he inspired my country before I was born, because we were really under the hammer, because we had 2 or 3 years when we were in the war. It was a 6-year war for us, 1939 to 1945. And this man, through his radio broadcasts and his extraordinary voice and his stubbornness, and walking amongst the people, walking amongst the rubble of London and Coventry and other cities that were badly bombed, did inspire and fortify a nation. But did you know he suffered from depression? Was that something you knew? Did I hear somebody say yes? Yes, he did. He called it the black dog. And he, according to biographers, he could be incredibly haughty and sarcastic towards his staff. Now, that tells me as a professional coach that the chances are he had some hidden self-esteem issues. That's actually driving those unhelpful behaviors, because they annoyed and irritated members of his staff. And he clearly was not experiencing inner peace, flow, and joy because of his depression. So that is an example where you can be exhibiting some of the qualities, but there is still more to unfold. Let's take a great example from your own country. I would imagine you would regard him as one of your greatest presidents ever, Abraham Lincoln. And this man had vision and had care for your country and managed to unite you after a civil war and ended slavery. But again, did you know that he suffered, according to biographers, from what was called melancholia in those days, which in these days is depression? So once again, one of your greatest presidents who left an extraordinary legacy and is probably by foreigners seen as your most famous president, probably ahead of George Washington, that might surprise you, even he was not feeling and experiencing inner peace, flow, and joy. What I'm trying to say is it's not binary. These are examples where you've got some of it, but not all of it. I think these are also good examples to show that even these diluted versions of potential presence produce results that pure charisma without the deeper core cannot possibly replicate. So again, you're seeing the difference. Now, some of you might be saying to yourself, well, is there any research to back all this stuff up, James? And this is where I say, well, not exactly. I would point you towards the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. See, I practice a lot in the hotel bedroom. On the flow. So there is that. So read that. That's quite interesting. I have to say he does go on a bit. The main points covered in the early chapters. Who's familiar, though, with Abraham Maslow? Ring a bell? Hierarchy of needs. That's what most of us in organizational life are familiar with. And that's him. He died relatively young. I think he was in his early 60s, and I think that would be late 60s or early 70s. And this man was remarkable because he started to shift the emphasis in psychology away from neurosis and illness and an emphasis on what's wrong with people to start studying genius and peak experiences and prodigies and so forth. You could say he's the father of what today is known as positive psychology. Anyway, he studied peak experiences. He was fascinated by that. These were intense episodes of satisfaction and flow and fulfillment and peace. And out of his research, he characterized 16 facets of those peak experiences. Now, they are listed in my book, and you will find that there's an extraordinary coincidence between the 7 qualities and the 16 characteristics. So I would refer you to that. More than that, no, I am using my intuition and my coaching experience. What I would say is, what I've already said, that everyone has potential for presence. I'm not saying that everyone has the same potential for leadership presence, because leadership is only one context in which to express presence. You may have a monk in Tibet who has clearly got presence. But I think everyone has their potential to unfold more of it. Now let's talk benefits, but with the benefit of talking through the 7 qualities in more depth. As I said before, I think as a leader, you need people's professional respect. They need to feel you know your stuff. But I repeat what I said at the beginning. That's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Respect alone for your technical competence is not enough. So let me get rid of that for a moment. So what I'm going to suggest is the benefits you can place in two camps. The benefits for you as leader and the experience of leading, and the benefits for your relationships with those you lead. Now, the benefits for you I've been touching on. Greater resilience, greater behavioral flexibility. You won't be caught in narrow bands of behavior, as many of my clients are, as successful as they are still. You will find your wisdom, your ability to discern wise choices in your creativity, your ability to come up with original solutions will grow. And this thing of gravitas will usually start to develop. I would call it an aura of approachable power and significance that you will start to acquire without straining. And it's a very, I say, approachable power. It's not a very poker face power. So this is what I mean by gravitas. You will find that will start to develop, and that makes it much easier to be visible, to be noticed by others, to prepared to be visible, and maybe say what nobody's been prepared to say, and be heard. So that is a priceless asset for leaders. So those are the benefits for you. If your presence is flowing, I think you will find that people trust your motives. They won't think that you are working to your agenda, your self-serving agenda, which is designed to give you more power, more wealth, more fame, more bonuses. They'll trust your motives. They will feel confident with you. And as a result, their energy towards the performance or the task will be released. They may or may not be inspired, depending on your level of presence. But what I do think will happen is that the bonds between you and the people you're leading, who are often your co-leaders, really, they will be much stronger. They'll be much closer, much more durable. And boy, do you need that through the tough times. I may have mentioned that you will have tough times as a leader before in this session. So now, you have your scores. What I'd like you to do is take that 4-page pack, and you will have that diagram. That's an example of how the scores can look. So if you scored yourself on 3, as in that example, you count out 3 sort of ripples back, and you make that bold. Do you follow what I mean? And then you repeat it for the 7 segments. And that's how you will now have a quick sort of photograph of how you are experiencing and how you are projecting your presence. Does that make sense? So if you've got a 3, you sort of thicken out the 3 part of the circle. If you've got a 4, ditto. If you've got a 9, and so forth, and then join them up by following the segment dividing lines, like that example. So what do you make of the sketch of yourself that you're seeing? So that now we're going to talk in the big group, all of us. Any questions you're asking yourself? Any thoughts? Any emotional reactions? Are any of you excited by what you see? Any of you disappointed by what you're seeing?
Yeah, I have a lot to work on.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I have a lot to work
You have a lot to work on. Do you want to say a bit more? Where have you got to work most, according to your own sketch of yourself? Balance. Balance. Is that because you are imbalanced towards one end or the other?
I got a 0.
Oh, you got a 0. Does that ring true for you?
I'm thinking it must.
So you're assuming it must be right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Others, reactions to what you're seeing, your sketch of yourself. This is a self-portrait. Other reactions? This part of the room? Alison, your table?
Self-esteem.
I would say self-esteem. So the question was, does trusting yourself fall under intuition or self-esteem? And I would say very much self-esteem. If we doubt our competence, we find it difficult to trust our abilities.
Well, see, in here I found my intuition is very high, whereas my self-esteem is my lowest point.
Ah, okay.
But I do trust it. And I trust my instinct.
You clearly trust your intuition, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if I trust myself in, like, maybe, like, work.
Okay. All right, I have no particular answer to that because I'm still a student of presence.
Yeah.
So did you hear that? So this lady feels that she's got high intuition, but lowish self-esteem. So she's wondering how that works. And the answer is, I don't know. I'm still learning myself. But there are some very creative people who are nervous to express that creativity around others. Okay, you're nodding. So that's how it can manifest in my experience. Couple of other comments or questions or reactions to your own sketch? Yes, sir.
I got a big old goose egg on inner peace.
You've got a goose egg on inner peace. Hang on, I got to know what that means. I have no idea. That must be an American bit of slang.
Zero.
Oh, you've got zero inner peace. Okay. I heard there was an expression on the TV, and it says Donald Trump doubles down on something. And I looked at your TV. I thought, I have no idea what that means. It's definitely locally expressed. Okay, you've got a zero on inner. Okay, now what's your reaction to that?
I don't really know, because I've always thought of myself
He doesn't know, for those who can't.
as a happy person, but maybe not so much a centered inner peace type person.
Yeah, now that's a really interesting point. There is some great work by a man called Martin Seligman on authentic happiness. Well worth reading his book, Authentic Happiness, because there is the happiness that comes from a series of pleasures, like being with a beautiful partner, having great food, winning a sports event, that sort of stuff. But the trouble is when the pleasure is over, the happiness goes down. So there is a sort of happiness that is dependent on events. And then there's a more authentic, durable, long-lasting happiness that comes from connecting with your values and doing work that is fulfilling to you. That may be the difference. And maybe you'll experience it, post-student days, perhaps. We'll take one more before we move on, because I'm trying to catch up a little bit of time. One more comment, one more question on the sketch. Sir.
The questions, when I went wrong, I went really wrong.
As a leader. So did you hear that over there? When this gentleman went wrong, he went really wrong.
That's all.
Ah. Okay. I made the silly assumption there was more to come. Okay. Yes, and I have screwed up big time. I have. And I'm afraid to say I repeated some mistakes. I remember putting too much pressure on an individual, and I did the same mistake in my second CEO job, and I did the same in the third, until I woke up and said, this is me. Because I was crossing the line between the responsibility for and the responsibility to. And sometimes I should have fired people earlier, sometimes. But I sort of believed in my ability to turn them around, and I suppose it was a Christian thing or something. Okay, so I'm now going to move on. So you now have, hopefully, a deeper understanding of presence. You have a deeper understanding of the degree to which you are or are not expressing your presence through this sketch. Now we're going to get into so what do you do about this? How do you grow your presence? And this is where we're going to get even more interactive. What I'm saying is that the key to it is self-mastery. But that's an interesting expression, self-mastery. Mastery of what? And who or what is doing the mastering? Now, I could lecture you on this, and I thought about it, but we're not going to have a lecture on this. I will offer you a model later on, but this is better understood through experience. So I'm going to ask you to lay aside your prejudices, and you will have prejudices, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to self-mastery, and work from the facts of your experiences in the next half an hour or so. It won't be easy for you, because I've developed these techniques from one-to-one client coaching, and then I've tried them in larger groups, but never as big as this. So what we're going to do are two experiments. So experiment number 1, which I hope you will find a lot of fun and very interesting. So here's experiment number 1. Experiment number 1, I'm going to ask you to take a small object. It could be a ring, a pen, or a smartphone, preferably turned off. And I'm going to want you to put your attention on that object, and exclusively that object. And the exercise is over when you realize you're no longer focusing on the object. When you realize you're thinking, I'm hungry. This is a stupid experiment. I wish I'd never seen this man. This was a mistake coming here. Oh, God, it's hot in here. Or whatever. When you notice, and note that I'm saying you when, because you will notice that your mind is not on the object. You are thinking or feeling something else. The experiment's over. Is this clear so far? Yep. Now, for a bit of fun, so I know how you're doing, I'm going to ask you to start with your hands up. So you need to choose your object. And when I say go, I haven't said it yet, I'm going to ask you to concentrate exclusively on the object. And when you realize that your mind has gone off this subject, bring your hand down and the experiment's over. Let's just be clear. There are no winners and losers. There is no embarrassment to this. This is an experiment. Try to be scientific about this. So just enjoy this. Are you completely clear on your instructions? You have your mission. Right, arms up. Focus your attention on the object and go. Okay, some hands going down. That's good. A lot of people grimly hanging on. This is not a competition, so relax and enjoy. Oh, hands are going down. This table is very motivated to keep their arms up. That was rotten of me, wasn't it? I want to cheat. Okay, sir, you can put your arm down. That wasn't that horrible of me. Yes. Yeah, well, see, I'm a parent, you see. This is the reward for... We now get to tease younger people from time to time. Right. Now, when I work with an individual executive leader, a president of a company or a director or vice president or a younger up-and-coming leader, what I will do is go to a flip chart like this and say, what did you experience? And they'll say, well, when I tried to focus my mind on the thing, stuff started coming in, and I would write it down. Now, I just don't have the time with you to write down your specific statements. So what I'm going to do is borrow real comments over the last 5 years or so. These are real client comments, responses to this exercise. I have a short attention span. Other thoughts crept in. It became difficult for me to stop my mind wandering off. I was determined to focus on the object, but there was other stuff trying to get in. I was aware of the other stuff intruding. I can't control my mind. It does it by itself. And my mind doesn't always do what I tell it to do. And I commanded my mind to focus on the object, but my mind wasn't responding to my command. Now, here's where you're laughing, so I'm hoping that means, okay, that's pretty similar to how I would have described the experience. Because I'm hoping, in the absence of going to you personally and saying, what did you experience, that you will, as a group, accept these statements as being pretty representative of your inner experience. Will you accept? I'm getting nods over here. Does it sound about the sort of stuff? Yeah, I'm getting powerful nods. Yeah? Over here? Yeah, casual. A bit doubtful, a bit skeptical there. Is that right? Are they reasonable? Yeah? Okay. So these are now your statements, okay? Tell me, what do you notice about the statements? Call it out whenever you're ready. So you're trying to blame something else. Okay. What else? Lack of control. Okay. Grant?
We're distinct from our own minds.
Oh, crikey. I thought we might spend another 5 minutes before somebody said that. He said, we are distinct from our own minds. What made you say that, Grant? Can you stand up and project? Grant is my timekeeper, so this is why I know Grant.
My child was wandering off. I can't control my mind. It's like I can't control my arm or something.
Do you see that?
My mind doesn't always do what I told the last one that was the most indicative. I commanded my mind to focus, but my mind wasn't responding to that.
All right.
I've dealt with that.
Thank you. Now, it's really interesting that the time cue is to speed things up by going to the answer I hope you would see. And this was not a fix-up. We did not. This is now. Sometimes it will take a long time, and a lot of people will say, "I can't believe it. My mind's all over the place. This is embarrassing." So a lot of sort of hitting themselves with what used to be called a cat of nine tails in medieval England. And what I will sometimes do to help people see it is put the top three into the background and bold certain minds. So if you're not seeing it, do you see it now? There is this subject-object distinction. I, me, and then my mind, and occasionally my thoughts, and it. Do you notice that? Anybody find that curious? Now we put it under the spotlight? It's odd, isn't it? Okay, not odd? A little bit odd, but not totally odd. Okay, it's a bit weird. A little bit weird. Okay, so now this is weird, coming up. Are you your mind? Now, this is where I asked you to leave your prejudices and be objective. On the basis of the evidence of your experience, I haven't argued with you, I've offered an experience. On the evidence of the experience, are you your mind? Yes. Yes, says this man. Others? No. Other views? Are you, all right, let's try that. Are you only your mind? What would you say? You're not only your mind. Now, this gentleman here says we are our mind. How does the data support that?
I think, therefore I am.
Okay, I'm going to challenge that, but I'm going to challenge that a little later. Remind me. I think that's dead wrong for reasons that will become clear. So I'm going to take that statement on. Not take you on. I think, therefore I am. I sticking my neck out. I'm saying it's dead wrong in my experience, in the work I do on myself, and in the experience of my leader clients. So who thinks that we are our mind? Hands up on the basis of this experiment, the data. I presume most of you came in thinking you are your mind. So if you think you are your mind, hands up on the basis of the data. So we do have a few people. Okay, who thinks you're not your mind on the basis of the data? Okay, so a majority not your mind. Now, let me ask you, am I my hand? Now, some of you are looking really suspicious. Okay, this is a trick question. I could embarrass myself if I say yes or no. Okay, I'm going to embarrass yourself. Am I my hand? Do I have a hand? Who is responsible for this hand? Very good. Very disciplined. So, for the moment, because I realize we've got people who are saying, yeah, but I think I still am my mind. Let me go back a bit. Some people will say to me, but hang on, James, this is a linguistic trick. How else are we supposed to talk about this? This is how we talk. Yes, but look at what just happened. Imagine the mind is like a cat, the family cat. And you said to the cat, anybody try to get a cat to sit, to order? Do you want to be humiliated? Try it. The cat might, if you're really lucky, but the cat will eventually shrug its shoulders, meh, and sort of wander off. Now just think about what happened. You commanded your mind to pay attention to the object. Immediately, if you think about it logically, to issue a command, to will it to do something, there is immediately a subject-object distinction, which should cause you to wonder, am I really my mind? But if you're still doubting it, your mind did not do what you wanted it to do in most cases. In most cases, you found yourself just going off thinking about lunch or whatever it was you were thinking about. So this isn't a linguistic trick. You wanted it to do X, but it did Y or Z or A or B. So on the basis of that, going back to the statement, would you accept as a working proposition, based on the evidence of the experiment, not your supposition, your presupposition before coming in today, that although you have a mind, I am not only my mind, I'm not my mind. Whatever I am more than my mind. Can you work with that based on the data for now? Oh, I'm getting nods, yeah? The suspicious table over here looking... Yes, sir, I was looking at you. What do you reckon? Can you live with it for now? Yes, he says. Not really, he says, but yeah. I'm not going to take him on. He's on the stage. Okay, right. So note that the data is saying we don't appear to be our mind. We appear to have a mind, just like we have a hand, but you don't say you are your hand. And now the data would suggest you're not your mind. So if you're not your mind, work with me on this, you're more than your mind, which seems to be something you are comfortable with, what are you?
You're the integrity of the connection between all the working pieces.
Okay, you are the... What? Subtle. This man said, see if I can do that justice, you are the integrity of the connections between the working pieces, the contents of mind. You know, who you believe you are, the places you want, and that sort of stuff. Does that ring true? And your memories and all that stuff? Does that ring true? Some of you are looking so suspicious right now. Okay. Now, this is where it's... Do you say something that's really embarrassing? So, does that sound like a reasonable answer? You know, I am who I think I am, my memories, my sense of my talents, my sense of my shortfalls. Because I have to say that is typically what my clients say. Okay? So you're the contents of mind. And it's an entirely reasonable answer. So this is where we go to a second experiment. Your most powerful, most unconscious contents of your mind are to do with your self-image. Who you think you are. The words that come after I am. So this is work done by a client 7 years ago, and he very decently a few years ago allowed me to use it at events like this. And I asked him to go back to when he was 15. And I asked him to remember the clothes he wore, the school he went to, the people he mixed with, his lessons, his daily routines, and so forth. And then tell me, having projected himself backwards, what were the words that came after I am? So this gentleman said, I'm good looking, I'm popular, I'm able... He wasn't filtering this, he was just being totally straight. I'm good looking, I'm popular, I'm able to hold my own, I'm able to stand up for myself physically, I'm friendly, and I'm mediocre intellectually. Okay? Then I asked him to let that go and go forward 25 years and remember where he was and what he was doing and who he was with and repeat that. And the words that came then were, at 25, I'm now clever. I'm intellectually superior. I'm physically fit. I'm desirable. I'm good looking. He meant for the opposite sex. And I'm a caring person. Then we let that go and I asked him to repeat the exercise when he was 35. 10 years before this. And now he's saying, I'm a manager. I'm good at what I do, but I'm not capable of being a director. And then his current self-image at the age of 45 was, I am a director. I'm only par for the course intellectually. I'm no cleverer than others. I'm feeling restless. I'm seeking fulfillment. Now, bless him, he's allowed us to see that. You have no idea what nationality he is, what country he lives in, so it's completely anonymous. But this is real, ladies and gentlemen. This is not fake. Okay, now here's the second experiment. Tell me, what do you see? What do you notice? Again, just yell out. There's no trick to this. Sorry, can you speak up? Yes, I saw you speaking, yes. Right, his confidence goes down. Yep. What else? He becomes more defined by his job as time marches on. Yeah, okay. What else do you notice? The gentleman there. He's aging. He's definitely aging. I can confirm that. As are we. I can feel my chin's not as smooth as it was. Yes. Over here, what do you notice? Oh, skeptical table. I'm teasing. You're not. What do you guys notice? What are you seeing there? He loses his sense of self? Can you explain more? Because I'm curious.
It's more like he defines himself by his qualities, but he doesn't
He doesn't let them all come together. Okay, one more.
He doubts himself intellectually.
He doubts himself intellectually, absolutely. Now, notice out of interest how difficult it is for us to simply notice what's there without judging it, without evaluating it, which you're all doing, and I would have done if somebody had put these before me. So, if I highlight these two, does that highlight, has the text changed in color, in part? I don't know how well the projector's working. Not very well, actually. So can you see that I've highlighted a manager, not capable of being a director at 35, and then a director at 45? Yeah. Let's try a more spectacular example. Does that highlight? Yes, you can see it up there. At 15, he's mediocre intellectually. At 25, he's intellectually superior. And at 45, he's par for the course intellectually. So this guy has gone from here, inferior, to superior, back to par for the course. Okay, now having highlighted that, what do you notice? So your perception of yourself goes up and down constantly in relation to others. Okay? I'm looking for something actually simpler than that. He's comparing himself to others. You're being too clever at this stage. There's something staring you. You're being too intellectual. What do you...
Finding himself more on his career or job.
He is, and he was struggling with a sense of fulfillment. That's correct. But there's something even simpler and more obvious, which once you've seen it, you go, oh yeah, that's obvious. At the moment, it's just hidden behind the veil. Grant, I'm going to...
Say anything about his intellectual capabilities when he was 35.
Yeah, that's true. But what do you notice? There's a pattern here. This makes up for you getting the first answer really quickly. Once you've seen it, it's completely obvious. Now, I bet at least two of you have got it, but don't dare to call it out. So the answer is simpler. You're getting closer. That last word is getting close to it. It's simpler than that. It comes back into balance, but again, that's judging, that's evaluating. It's tough to stay out of it, I know. I'd rather you tell me rather than me tell you. Somebody's going to get it. Yes, sir. He is developing. What's another word for that? Maturing. Okay, we're judging a bit again. So keep it simple. What are you noticing? What's happening to the self-image over the 4 decades? Yes! That's it. That's it. That's it. Now you look at it, the self-image has changed. But he didn't experience it changing. It changed so gradually that he didn't spot it. There's a horrible story, I hope it's apocryphal, of putting a frog in a saucepan and then heating up the water. Do you know this horrible story? It's really horrible. And it is said that the frog won't notice that the water's heating up and won't jump out to survive. Whereas you put it into boiling water, it will jump straight out. Well, our self-image changed. Yours has changed. At some point, I said, I'm a boy. That's a simple way of putting it. But at some stage, I said I was a man. I cannot tell you when. So our self-image changes over time. And this exercise allowed this client to helicopter above his life and see that for the first time. Is it now obvious now that we pointed out? His self-image has changed. Now, to be clear, at the age of 15, he wasn't saying to himself, I currently see my self-image as good-looking, popular, able to hold my own, stand up for himself, I'm friendly and I'm media. No, this was his truth. This is how he experienced life, and all of the feelings that flowed from it. Ditto at 25, 35, and 45. But it was a filter that he created. You with me now? And yet he let go of it like a snake sloughing its skin. So if the self-image changes, and it does, no exceptions, I assure you, based on many, many, many client cases, what might you conclude from that? Sir?
You can change.
Yes, you can change. Now, this is where executive coaching clients start to get very excited. Yeah. And they start to conclude, maybe I can change faster than I did. Maybe I can be the architect of what I change towards, rather than just be buffeted around like a cork on the sea, driven by the winds and the prevailing currents. Exactly that. What else can you conclude at an even deeper level? That if you've changed already, you can change again. There's something even deeper you can conclude from this.
It takes time.
It sure does take time, although you can accelerate this, which is very much what self-mastery is about, accelerating it, taking control. What else? We are certainly always subject to change. That is absolutely true, but there's something even deeper that you can conclude. The only thing holding you back is you. That is true, although what is you? But we'll come to that shortly. So let me give you a coaching question that might prompt you towards this. Are you your self-image? Are you your self-image? Okay, now be brave, call out. Yes, of course you would say yes, yes. We know that. So on the basis of this evidence, the self-image keeps changing. Was he his self-image? Clearly, he thought he was in each area, but are you your self-image? Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah, absolutely it does. You are what you think you are. But now objectively, helicoptering above this man's life and using it as a proxy for your own, because I assure you this will be paralleled in your own life if we did a coaching session, I assure you, are you your self-image? I know you thought you were before today. It sure felt like it. Let me give you an embarrassing example. I'm 17. And we used to have a sixth form. Oh, you don't know what a sixth form is. It's the last 2 years of school, of secondary school. What do you call high school? Okay, 16, 17, 18, those years. Okay. And we would have a dance, and it was an all-boys school. And so we would invite girls from neighboring schools. And there was this dark-haired girl who was beautiful. So, you see, the memories are coming back now. Somehow, I can't remember how, I found out her phone number and I phoned her at home and I asked her to the next dance. And she said, yes. That was the good news. The bad news was when she saw me, she realized she thought she said yes to somebody else. So I got rejected very firmly. Okay? So how do you imagine I dealt with it? Because I was crushed at 17. Because I decided that it was inevitable that she would reject me because I'm not attractive. I saw myself as thin, my teeth stuck out, I had glasses, I've had my cataracts operated on, so when you have your cataracts dealt with, you can have your vision corrected. But in those days I wore glasses, I was super thin, I had frizzy hair, my mother used to cut it and she really wasn't very good. I have to admit I was not an attractive package. So what happened confirmed my worst suspicions, my belief that I am not attractive. So, how did I deal with it? What was my defensive pattern? Can you imagine? I changed my self-image. That would be nice, but unfortunately, no. I didn't know this stuff then. I was only 17. That would be a good end, but it didn't happen. No. I didn't change my outward image. No. I came up with a brilliant strategy. See if you can guess what it was. It wasn't far off that. This gentleman said, hold up in your room. No, I didn't do that. A couple more guesses, and then I'll admit it what I did.
Did you downplay what your perception was of the young lady?
No, well, I blame her. I never wanted her anyway. No, because the truth was, I did. No, I wasn't positive. No, I never asked a girl out again. Brilliant strategy. Because can you see the payoff? Can you see the payoff? I cannot possibly be rejected. See it? It worked. There was one slight snag, but it worked brilliantly. Okay, so there's an example of me. I'm experiencing my self-image, and it feels real because I felt crushed. Now, one of the great secrets my clients learn is this. You have feelings, and those feelings are real. But the ideas which are controlling the feelings, they are not necessarily real. So your self-image, which is the most fundamental content in your mind, along with your worldview would be life, the purpose of life is this. You could say it's about getting to heaven, or you could say you could be an atheist and you could be materialistic and say it's pointless, this is all an evolutionary accident or whatever. But let's stay with self-image. You feel the feelings, but the ideas that the feelings are flowing from, they're not necessarily true. Now, you have seen that this particular person, and it will be true of you, the self-image changes over years. Now, it is true that it will feel real, but it keeps shifting. So, last question again. Are you your self-image? I know it feels like it, but now look at the data. It keeps shifting. Are you your self-image? No, I'm getting no's now. Now, this is a challenge to your prejudice. And I haven't forgot, I think, therefore I am. I'm coming on that. So, we were working with this proposition, I have a mind, but I'm not my mind, I'm more than my mind. Now, let me take away that bit and now add in maybe the tentative conclusions from the experiment we've just done. And I have fundamental beliefs about who I am, but actually I am not these beliefs. I am more than my mind, bringing in the earlier conclusion, and I am more than my most fundamental beliefs. Now, on the basis of the data from the experiments, can you accept that that is a reasonable proposition, that it fits the facts, even though it may not fit what you assumed before you came here today? Was that a yes? Was I hearing a murmur? I know it's a bit shocking, and I'm not expecting you to buy it whole, but there is a problem if you don't buy it at all, which has become very obvious. Can you accept that it hits the facts, that it meets the facts? I'm getting nods. Give me some feedback over there. Yeah, a bit tentative. Even the gentleman there. Over there? Does it fit the facts? Okay. So then, here's my question. What are you? If you're not your mind, you're more than your mind, and you're not the, what did you very eloquently call it, Naya? You're the totality of your interconnecting parts.
Of the connections between all
If you're not the sum of your parts, mental parts, another way of it, if you're not that either, because that keeps shifting, so you cannot possibly be that, what are you? Now, you may be thinking, I came to a session on leadership presence, and this is getting mystical, spiritual, philosophical. What has this got to do? Well, you see, let's go back. While you think you are your mind, and while you think you are your beliefs, you are locked into a closed loop. You cannot practice self-mastery. Self-mastery now means that you are mastering your mind and its flows and its contents. But while you believe that you are the flows of your mind, the movements of the mind, and you are the contents, you cannot practice self-mastery. You are it. You are locked in a closed loop. So I'm afraid this presupposition is essential for you to grasp and feel it if you are seriously to practice self-mastery. Because if you don't, you will be fighting what you think is yourself. So what I do when I work with clients is offer them an alternative psychological model that fits the facts. This is a huge simplification of it. This is a psychological model of you, and there's much more detail in the book. What I suggest to them is that they see themselves as what I refer to as a self, which is not a self-image. When psychologists mainly talk about self, they're actually talking about self-image. You now see I am drawing a distinction between self and self-image. So the proposition I put to my clients, and we don't get religious, we don't get philosophical, because this is fitting the facts, is that maybe you are a self. That you are a creative center of potential, but not of content, with three faculties, three aspects, three facets. The first of them is will. Will is the capacity to intend, to choose between options, to persist despite obstacles. And it is distinct from the urges of the body to procreate, to excrete, to each. This is will that can override that. The second aspect is self-awareness, which you could call consciousness, but I'd rather use simpler language. We know that plants and animals are aware. Plants respond to light with the process of photosynthesis, and they grow towards the light. And if you have a dog and you call its name, it will pay attention to you and it may come to you. So it is aware and it is responding. But we, as far as we know, are unique on this planet. As far as we know, we are aware that we are aware. You follow the distinction? A cow, as far as we know, doesn't say, I'm a cow, and that's a horse. But these are fellow cows, as far as we know, because they don't have language for sure. But that's an intellectual thing, a cognitive thing, the language. So we are able to take a look at ourselves and examine what's in there and examine if we want to let things go. This is this priceless gift of self-awareness, which can also catch us out, as I'll explain in a moment. The third faculty is imagination. This is not intellect, this is more than intellect. This is the capacity to imagine something you've never experienced, or perhaps, if you're an Einstein, that no member of humanity has yet realized. And if you think about it deeply, those are the critical three faculties that mark out a human being, and they make us a creative center of potential. Now, what I'm saying is, you don't just have these faculties. I'm suggesting as a model to explain what was happening in those two experiments, that you are these faculties. You are will. You are self-awareness. You are imagination. A stream of consciousness. The religiously inclined might refer to spirit or soul. I don't particularly want to get into reincarnation or anything like that. Just say, this is the answer to what you are, more than your mind and more than your beliefs. Now, if you think about it, if you accept Maslow's theory, which I do actually, that life isn't about just treading water, as Freud thought. Freud had a theory that we are an I, an ego, and we're caught between the id, your desires, your seething mass of impulses say, go on, have another hamburger, go on. And over here, the superego is saying, no, you shouldn't do that, you get fat, that's bad for your cholesterol. And so you've got this nagging, you need to do this, you shouldn't do that, and it, go on. And the ego, this is how Freud described it, very simply put. So Freudians will be probably upset with how I'm simplifying it. The ego is the one that's trying to get real and say, hang on, guys, I've got to do my work and have relationships, so can we have a little bit of peace here? And Freud's view was, the best you can do is tread water as healthily as you can and get through life. Maslow said, no, it is about becoming more. It's about becoming everything you're capable of being, which I imagine as leaders, experienced leaders, or would-be leaders does appeal to you. And I think it is correct. As we were chatting about yesterday, the biggest thing in life, the universe, you know what's happening to the universe? It is expanding. And you know the second extraordinary thing about the universe? Its rate of expansion is accelerating, which shouldn't really happen, which is why scientists are looking for dark energy and dark matter. Now, I think that's relevant because even the most macro thing in life, the universe, even that's becoming more. So for me, the idea that we're here to become more makes sense. Now, here's the thing, and this is where I will need this flip chart. If you think about it logically, if this is becoming more, having more wisdom, more love, more understanding, more success, whatever the more is, and that is time, if you are to experience yourself as being more, at some point you have to logically experience yourself as being this and having this amount of more, whatever it is, what quality it is, and at some stage in a healthy, fulfilling, growing life, you will have transitioned to that, which as you saw in those self-images over the decades, means letting go of this and taking on this. Is that making sense? And hopefully you experience yourself as having grown like that. But to do that, you have to have taken on a particular form. But I'm saying that self doesn't have form. It's before form. Now that's when we come to the second aspect of your psychological constitution, which is mind. With its flows, its movements, and its contents. Your beliefs, your memories, and the habits stored in your in the circuits in your brain, and your memories and so forth. So this is a much simplified model because, in fact, the model I use with clients is there are 4 levels of mind, but we don't have the time to get into that. So self uses mind as its molding clay, as its sandpit. And it creates a sense of image and a sense of what the world is like and other beliefs and other thoughts and patterns in mind. So it is its tool. Now, over the years, clients have said to me, I'm really struggling to understand the difference between self-awareness, consciousness, and mind. So this analogy I have found sometimes helps. So imagine an old-fashioned film projector, and there is a light source projecting light up onto the screen. That is analogous to consciousness, self-awareness. Now, if you had pure self-awareness and it's projecting onto the screen, what would you see on the screen? Would you see moving images? Any clear images? It's not a trick question. What would you see? Yeah, a sort of ball of, nothing in particular, but a ball of light, something like that, with fuzzy edges around. Exactly. So what do you need for there to be sharp, clear edges and movement and life, apparently, on the screen? You need a film. So you could say, you could compare the stream of light as your consciousness, your self-awareness, and the film strip being mind, and the images on the film strip being your beliefs and your memories and your habits. That works for some clients. Now, you may be thinking, well, okay, so he's describing self as a creative being of potential that creates a sense of self and has a place in the world. And by the way, you cannot not have a sense of self. You cannot not have a self-image. You would literally go insane. So that's what you use mind for, says this model. But theoretically, this is saying we should all have the capacity to live a healthy, fulfilling, growing life. So if that is true, why do so many people not? Why do you struggle, particularly as leaders? And you could argue that this is the world's psychological problem, and it's very real for leaders because leaders are people, and we will identify to a greater or lesser extent with our false self. So now let me go back. I promise to come back to you, sir. I think, therefore I am. I thought Descartes got it wrong. It should have been, I am, therefore I think. That's how I would respond to Descartes, but obviously he's not around. I am, therefore I think. And my clients realize that this is exciting. This fits the facts. If you don't accept that whatever name you want to give it, you are more than your mind and its contents, I'm afraid you can't practice self-mastery. You are going to be fighting a war against yourself and you will lose. So you have to learn to helicopter above this. So what I'm saying is you've got to be holding the presupposition, as I've said it there, you're more than your mind, you're more than your self-image, you're more than your beliefs and your habits and your memories. You're a creative center of a consciousness, and I'm calling it a self. Without that presupposition, you can't practice what I'm going to suggest you might do. And so that's the most important thing for me to say in this part of the session. So I think there are 4 areas of focus if you now want to work on your self-mastery. The first is to learn how to disidentify from your negative beliefs. So what you first have to do is identify them, not identify with them, but identify them, and then disidentify. Now, this is not the same as disassociation. Disassociation is denying what's in your mind, numbing yourself to your feelings. Quite a lot of leaders numb themselves against their feelings. This is not disassociation. That is unhealthy. This is identifying what's there and then putting a little bit of space between you and it. But you can only do that if you've now begun to suspect that whatever you want to call yourself, you are more than your mind. I know of 2 practices which I've tried and worked with clients. The most powerful, the most successful is mindfulness meditation. Is anybody familiar with mindfulness meditation? So 1 or 2, 3 or 4. This is rightly getting attention in the scientific community around the world. Just over a year, or just around a year ago, it was on the front cover of Time, getting tremendous airplay in the United Kingdom. It's being taught to kids. It has huge benefits for well-being and so forth. I recommend 5 to 10 to up to 15 minutes of mindfulness meditation to my clients to start to practice observing what's going on and experiencing that they are something more. The second area of focus is, once you've got some momentum on disidentification, is to start looking for your limiting beliefs from this position that you are more than them, so you're not caught by them, and you start to query them. Now, the easiest way to deal with them is, in fact, to engage a coach. But if you don't want to or you can't afford to, you can practice what I call self-inquiry. And in the book, there are 18 areas you can look at, I would suggest over 18 months, guides to where you can look for your limiting beliefs, find them, challenge them, and start to let them go. Because my clients always find that their limiting beliefs are not true. The third area of focus is coming into contact with your values and then getting a sense of purpose. It is tougher to do this when you're struggling with self-esteem issues and limiting belief issues. But the two practices are, first, to uncover your values, which is often a big problem for middle-aged leaders, because the values they're living to are their values from their 20s and 30s, and they're starting to wonder, for what am I doing this? And then I found it helpful in my life to write a personal mission and vision statement. And there is a difference in my experience between vision and mission. Mission is your purpose. Vision is your unique way in which you're going to enact that purpose. That's how I distinguish between the two. So I actually wrote down my vision and my mission for myself before resigning from my job and traveling to Akron, Ohio, to tell my boss I was leaving. And then the last area of focus is behavioral and thinking habit change. What I found is that you cannot make major changes in your behavior. Let's say you've got a leader who is reluctant to mix with people he or she doesn't know well, reluctant to walk around the factory or walk around the ship or walk around the army base or wherever. And there are lots of leaders who struggle with that. They might tell themselves it's not real work, or I don't have the time. And I used to struggle with that. It's certainly not real work. But actually it makes a huge difference. And what they're scared of, typically, is being ignored, for example. Because that will confirm how insignificant they really are, that they're depending on their rank as general or colonel or managing director or vice president marketing for people to take notice of them. So what I found is the only way for people to change massively in their behavior and thinking habits is to find the root belief and start to dissolve it. But unfortunately, the echoes of the belief stay on in the brain. We know this from neuroscience. So it is necessary to bring your attention away from old habit, which is unhelpful, which is formed as a result of the belief, and practice a new habit. It only, in my experience, takes 2 or 3 months of concerted practice, and now the belief falls away. But if you haven't worked on the belief, so the habit falls away. But if you haven't worked on the belief in the first place, the habit change, if you just try to change a habit behaviorally, it just doesn't seem to stick. This is a technique that I call 4R. It's not yet in the book, but it will be in the second edition. And it's something I've adopted from successful research around patients with obsessive-compulsive disorder in Los Angeles. We can talk about it later if you like, but the first R is register, that the old habit's about to show itself, reframe its meaning, then refocus on your intent now, and then reaffirm whatever you want to call it. But it is a practice. What I'm saying is, even after working on limiting beliefs, you will have to put in a few months on practicing new behaviors under pressure. Oh, yes. If this interests you, go to that website, the one written up there. You go to the tool download section. You can download free tools that are repeats of what's in the book. You'll see frameworks for mindfulness meditation, for the values exercise, the vision and missions exercise, if that is of interest to you. So let me go to the wrap-up slide. What I'm saying is that feeling your presence, expressing your presence has benefits for you, and it has benefits for those you lead and the relationships. You will feel more skill, more flexibility, more resilience, more flow, and those you lead are more likely to be inspired and they're more likely to trust you and, frankly, enjoy your leadership. I've been saying that everyone, in my view, has unique potential, that leadership does not show in any one way. I've spent time with you to discuss what it is and what it isn't. And I made a point of contrasting it with charisma, because I think there is a distinction there. And I said that, or I argued certainly, that for me the root is wholeness, this absence of a sense of inner division, this alignment of your purpose and your self-image and your feelings about both. Now, although I don't think it shows through any behaviors, I do think there are 7 core qualities, and you've spent time on those, and you've done a sketch of that. But I reiterate, it isn't a case of you either have presence or you don't. You can show it in degrees. And even famous people from the past like Churchill and Lincoln, I think were examples of that. And then I've explained the biggest single idea that in my experience you have to take on if you are to release your presence. And that is the presupposition that whatever you want to call yourself, you have a mind and you have beliefs. You must have those to be in the world. But you are more than that. And therefore you can change. You can rise above them. If you don't take on that view, then it is a struggle. So that's how you grow your presence. And then I've suggested 1 or 2 methods. And with that, I'm going to finish. And we said we'd finish at 12:45. So we have 2 or 3 minutes for more questions. Am I all right with that, Alison? Now, it may be you're just drained, but I'm done. It's questions, comments. Does that resonate? Yes, ma'am.
So, you never asked to grow out again. So, did the mother of your children ask you out? You can tell me.
Yeah. Yes, basically, she made things easy for me. Yes. Yes, she did, actually. Yeah. Yeah. She said she spotted my potential. She said she likes odd men. Other questions, thoughts, reactions? Sir?
The statement that's a couple of slides back there about, I was part of the statement that the whole, let me actually.
Could you stand up and sort of yell so everybody can hear?
Yes, so I was trying to emphasize the positive psychology that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, Abraham Maslow.
Yes, sir. Well, let me read this to you. Something like that. It is how much the positive psychology plays here. That's the statement that you produced, which is really kind of powerful. However, it says here, I have a mind, but I'm not my mind, and I have fundamental beliefs. It continues. So it is. To me, it's most people are negative. Most of us, the way I see the world, and to have that's very powerful. However, to me, I see it's positive psychology.
Okay.
Maybe I think that's what I'm trying to emphasize.
Okay. Thank you. A couple minutes more and then we'll finish. Who expected to hear this kind of stuff when you walked in at 9 o'clock? There's a chuckle, so this was not what you were expecting. Is that good? It's good. Okay. The things that concern us, the things that motivate us, that inspire us, I could not see a jot of difference. But we had to become very raw, very real, very honest with each other. I think a human is a human. I think we share masculine energies and feminine energies, and they're not to do with male or female. So my suspicion is not. And working with female leaders, they have these same sort of limiting beliefs as the males. At this point, I don't think there's a huge difference. I think it's made more apparent by our roles and old history. And actually, you sell more books if you talk about the differences between men and women. And people, I'm from Venus and Mars. My suspicion is, and I remember talking to an American professor, our likenesses are greater than our differences. But that is just my personal opinion. Alison, do we need to stop there? I think then it is time for lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.